Hi. Elizabeth in North Carolina, Werner in Hamburg,
Well, it's
Jamie and
nice
I
to
in
see you in
Oregon.
sunshine, Elizabeth. It's bright in your room.
We had
She's on mute though.
we had nice
Yeah, there she is.
sunshine yesterday.
Beautiful,
Are you sunny there?
very sunny, and a little bit of rain this morning, so everything's turning crazy green. It's beautiful.
Good. You have proper seasons in Carolina, correct? Yeah.
We do.
All
A little
four.
bit of snow, kind of like probably a little bit like the weather in Greece and Turkey,
Mhm.
in our favorite areas of those countries.
How far are
But
you? What side of the Appalachian Mountains are you?
we're on the eastern side,
Mhm.
kind of in the middle of North Carolina. So I'm about 2.5 hours from the coast and about 2.5 hours from the mountains.
Oh,
So
okay.
just like us. Yeah.
The sand, I'm the sandwich filling.
Although it's a little bit more convenient. 1 hour to the coast, 1 hour to the mountains. So either direction. So kind of nice.
Yeah, nice.
So I wanted to share with you a little bit on this particular well-established, very popular model of well-being called PERMA, P-E-R-M-A, by Martin Seligman and colleagues has developed this out of University of Pennsylvania. And it's a really good outline to think through because it just gives you these 5 points, and you can kind of we can do a reflection on our lives right now to see how we're doing in these different areas. So first of all, before we get to the PERMA model, there are a couple ways to break down kind of the general outline of well-being as studied by psychologists and researchers. So it's over on the right side of the screen, there's these two main categories in well-being, and they use these old Greek terms, eudaimonia and hedonia. And of course, we recognize that phrase hedonia, like hedonist or somebody who's all pleasure seeking. And it has that element to it, that idea of, seeking pleasure, although we tend to think of it as in kind of a depraved kind of way or animalistic kind of way. And it can involve that. It can involve just, eating all the food you want, having all the sex you want, and, sleeping around and being lazy and stuff. But when you put it in terms of well-being, then the pleasure has to have a quality to it. It has to be a quality that actually does you good. It does something to serve your life and your longevity. So the quality of life and the length of life. So in this term, subjective well-being, when they study it in psychology, they ask people, how do you feel? What is your emotional state? And it has two elements to it. One is how you feel, and then your judgment of how well your life is going. How satisfied are you with your life? So that's where hedonia is talking about, your general appraisal of how you're feeling about your life in general. But then on a higher level, this eudaimonia is referring to more like how you're functioning, how you're operating inside your mind and outside with other people and in your life in general. So this is called psychological well-being in more modern terms. And this has to do with how you think and how you behave. And it could be about things that are particularly, like the ancient Greeks talked about, living a good life, a life that is well lived, doing things that are good, considered good, not only towards yourself, but in community. So this has a little bit higher and more social elements to it. If we switch over here to the left side of the screen, excuse me, Martin Seligman, the same person who developed the PERMA model, had a previous model to kind of organize the discoveries from research into these three categories. And they overlap with eudaimonia and hedonia. So that's why I put that on the right side and then these on the left side, because they have some sort of overlap to them. And so here, starting at the bottom of the authentic happiness model, is we have the pleasant life, the aspects of our life that are about, that are pleasurable, really on that basic body level. So this involves having high levels of positive emotions and low levels of negative emotions. So we have two channels. We have a a positive feeling channel, and then we have a negative feeling channel. We can actually be excited about something and be scared at the same time, like jumping out of an airplane. So you can have both. And the idea here is a more pleasant life would have, higher levels of those positive and a lower level of the negatives, so that you're not like stressing yourself out on the same while you're in a negative way while you're stressing yourself in a positive way. So anticipating being hungry and anticipating some good food, sexual attraction, being excited about a birthday party coming up, something like that. Those would all be positive excitements with very low levels of negative attached to them. But like I said, jumping out of an airplane would probably have both. It's going to be fun. Maybe I'm going to die. So this also involves satisfaction with life. Again, having an evaluation like, yeah, my life is going well. I like what's happening. And so again, that's kind of an internal, your body is registering pleasure with how you perceive things are going. Werner, were you going to say something?
Yeah, no, my first thought is, who is deciding what is positive and what is negative? I sometimes think I meet people who are just the opposite of my positive and negative. What they think and feel what is positive and negative.
Yeah, well, there is some debate going on. It's like using the phrase positive and negative to describe them can be like a judgment, because like one of the conversations that come up, sometimes being angry is a good thing. Sometimes being sad is a good thing. It's like you need it. It's an expression. It's indicating that something is happening in your life that you need to pay attention to. And so we could evaluate that as actually having a good cause. I suppose where we can get down and use one way to view the use of positive negative is to look at it more in terms of like a scientific level, like a neural level, or even physics. In physics, we have a positive pole and a negative pole on electrically charged particles, and or a positive or negative. You could say a positive correlation means they both move together. A negative correlation means they move apart. So we can view it in a little bit more neutral or more technical language. But when we view it in more of a cultural language, positive and negative, then we're thinking, oh, we want these and we don't want those. But doggone it, if I see an injustice happening, I want to be angry, because the anger means that chemicals are being released into my body that are urging me to act, making me more courageous, making me want to intervene at some risk to myself to stop that bad thing from happening. So that's good, even though it's negative on the chart. But that's really good. It also, different people, I described in a previous webinar how some people, like particularly extroverts, really like to have higher levels, high energy levels, high activation levels of emotion, excitement, feeling very, high energy states. But then other people, sometimes introverts or people from different cultures or different wiring, want positive feelings, but of a low activation state, like peacefulness, serenity, contentment. Those are all words that really resonate with me. I'm not one who seeks after getting ramped up and hyped up and all excited. That's kind of stressful to me, actually. I don't like to stay there very long. I want to come back to my little Zen, peaceful, quiet world where everything calm. That's where I want to be. So to me, high energy states sustained very long would be unpleasant for me. and for other cultures too. Eastern cultures would generally tend to be quieter, value different things. So yeah, it's a really good point you bring up, because that came up in even some of the things that I've read, and some of the critiques of the various ways that they measure this. They found out, oh, some of the ways they measure positive and negative emotions are very Western, or very skewed towards a certain personality type. And that's some of the criticisms that come up when, what one set of researchers designs this, and the other one's going to say, hey, I think you're missing something. I think your results don't actually reveal the full picture of humanity. So then the next set of researchers try to come up with a better measurement device, and then they test it out across all different ages and different locations and different cultures. And it's like, ooh, it's pretty interesting how all this goes. So that might come up some more. And that's what's so fun, to have conversations and have camps together when we come together from so many different cultures, different places of the planet, is that we're starting to have conversations and make observations when we're with each other that expand our perspective, that expands our understanding of what goodness is, what good people are, what good feelings are, because we're hanging out with people who are unlike ourselves. Engaged life. So the next one up there, the engaged life. This is moving a little bit more into the cognitive, into what's happening in the mind, and concepts that they study that are related to engaged life is flow state, like she said, Mihaly, in his book Flow, and his research on flow. Mental engagement, being absorbed, being totally concentrating on something, attention. This involves cognitive well-being, so thinking processes, being more coherent. You're engaged in tasks that are interesting and more aligned with your values, and you feel better. But when we're having to be involved in things that aren't of interest to us or aren't aligned with our values, we feel stressed. We might be disciplined about doing these things, but we don't want to sustain those for very long, because they kind of go against the way that we're wired. But engaged life, as you think about that, you could think about things where you are very engaged in your work or your hobbies, things that easily attract you and occupy your thinking. And it's still kind of centered on the self. It's kind of about, me feeling pretty good. But then we move up to the next level, in the meaningful life. This encompasses, then takes in that bigger picture of you as an individual, me as an individual, part of something bigger, a community, a family, a partnership, a marriage or a partnership, a team, a work team, spiritual community, or just humanity, or Gaia, part of the planet in the whole ecosystem. So people can draw their circles that encompass more than themselves. And this, one way to define it is it's service to something higher than the self. And it involves positive social functioning as well. So it definitely involves interrelating with other organisms and getting along with them in a way that's somewhat cooperative. We can't just eat all the animals on the planet and then they disappear, and then there'd be no more animal food, which for us quasi-vegans, probably not a bad deal. but nonetheless, you don't want to eat up your whole food supply, so you need to live in cooperation, obviously, with the whole ecosystem, which humans are now finding we're not doing a great job of. So that describes what Seligman would call the authentic happiness model. So pleasant life, engaged life, and meaningful life. So if you've got a sense of what those are like, we can take a moment then to reflect, and which one do we kind of feel that we have more of a natural emphasis on? And it could have changed at different parts of our life too. So maybe right now at this stage in life, to say which one really kind of feels like it occupies more of your interest or your attention at this time. And if anybody wants to comment on that, they can. one thing in the study of developmental psychology, how people change, or how they're the same, or how they change over the span of over a lifespan. As we get older, they say from the 40s on, generally people tend to be more focused on meaning and others, and how can we make an impact, and how can we support others. You might say it's kind of moving into the grandparent stage, or the parent or grandparent stage, where, you know, spiritually or biologically, we're concerned with others and or our impact, or, you know, something that's going to last beyond ourselves. So in general, people tend to move towards the meaningful focus as they get older in life. Oh, you're unmuted right there.
I'd say that for me right now in my life, and you know, I'm definitely within 5 to 10 years of retiring from my work as, you know, a teacher. I would say that it's somewhere between the meaningful and engaged. I mean, I love the pleasant, but I think I feel most alive and most glad to be alive when I'm engaged in something that I do think has some larger benefit than just to myself. But I think that I've given so much in my work over, you know, 36 years, that I also have to be aware of dialing it back sometimes in certain tasks, or to not try to think there's something wrong with me if certain things I need to do to make a contribution are really not aligned with what my interests are, or what where I really feel in the zone. And so ideally they're all three, you know, working together. But I would say that right now I'm really trying to give a little more attention to what truly engages me.
Yeah.
And that if it can serve a larger purpose, oh, that's even better.
Well, there's an element of, even though we might emphasize one at different times, there's an element of balance between all these, because all of them, they're kind of like different features of well-being, and overemphasis on one and underemphasis on another can be challenging. So that's where at different stages of life, we might find ourselves having to kind of, something within us pulls our attention back to one of these areas, because we realize for our well-being's sake that we need to improve this area. That's one of the other points, not just merely which one are we attracted to, but which one should we perhaps give a little bit more attention to.
Yeah, on that note, I could answer as well, Matt. I would say that when I was first starting out on my independent life, the meaningful life was probably the primary focus of the decisions I made, the drive, the push, the directions I went. But I didn't do it in a way that was healthy for my mind and my body. And it drove me into a state in this last year where I've been solely focused on the pleasant life. And in that place, it's learning to have a better connection between emotions and mind and body, and learning to listen to those, communicate with those, to have a better fluidity between those aspects, so that once I pursue those meaningful things, I can bring my body along in a healthy way, and one that's not caustic to it or to those around me.
Yeah.
And in a process of pursuing that, it takes me into an engaged life where I'm having to access and resource some of these things that apply to an engaged life, like flow state or cognitive and well-being, the practices of various different therapeutic and psychological and physical behaviors and disciplines to help support, nurture, reinforce pleasant life state. The hope is that to get good enough communication, that then we can re-engage in meaningful life. But I feel like I'm on a very primal, basic level of development as far as reteaching my, like I said, the emotion side, my right side of my hemisphere, and the left side of my hemisphere together to then create a homeostasis with the physiological aspects of my body, because it doesn't like to behave right now.
Yeah.
Two additional questions. What do you mean with absorption in engaged life? It's not clear to me.
Oh, an engaged life. Absorption is like being absorbed in a task. Like you lose sense of time, you lose sense of awareness of things around you. Like let's say when we're in a swim lesson, we get together and we're learning and we're both focused and we're in that task and you're learning and we're not paying attention to anyone else in the pool area. We forgot about what was happening at home. The world's falling apart, but it doesn't matter. We're so interested in what's happening. We're kind of sucked into the situation and nothing else matters. That'd be kind of a way to describe being totally absorbed.
More in Intel terms than social terms.
Our focus becomes very small and narrow in a small area. So we could imagine then, even taking that idea, it's not hard to imagine an extreme in any one of these. You could think of an example where somebody was either because of external pressures or internally, a person was so focused in one to the neglect of the other two. It's like pleasant life. You can imagine, I don't know, I'm thinking of like some hippies or something in the 60s or the 70s, and they're just like, hey, it's just be free and happy, and there's no sense of being a part of anything else or doing anything meaningful or of deep skilled interest. And then engaged life, I think of like a father and a son or a daughter who's a really good athlete, and they're just become so absorbed in training that kid to be the best chess player or the best tennis player or whatever, and there's no greater meaning and there's nothing happy going on. It's just push to be the best at this activity, and to what other outsiders would view as to the harm of other aspects of life. And then of course, like as JB was saying, somebody could be so involved in serving others or being a part of some great cause that they're not actually taking care of themselves. They're not actually tapping into what really is their own self. They've been caught up into a cause that doesn't really fit them, but that's how they were raised, or that's the political climate that they were sucked into, or whatever. So we can think of examples where it definitely wouldn't be good for people. But at different times, both stages of life, we might say, hey, I've been doing really good in this area. I think I need to put more emphasis in another area. And even from day to day, we might switch a little bit. We might say, hey, I think today is my day off. I really need to work on, I just need to, get my favorite cup and go for a favorite walk and hang out with my favorite person. It could mean, or even a form of, we might go swimming. We might go for a workout. We might go for practice music or art. To use energy, it takes a lot of work, but we gain energy of a different type when we do it. So even though you're tired from getting home from work, we might still want to go for that swim because it's going to recharge us in a way that wouldn't if we just sat around. So let's move on to that PERMA model itself. And it's taking it's along the same lines, but it's expanding it with a little bit more detail now. And on this model, PERMA, so the PERMA is represented in the first letter of each one of these categories. And the first one is positive emotions, which we already kind of understand. That's that hedonia. That's the subjective measure of positive emotions and personal sense of satisfaction. So that's and that's measured by what you think you're feeling, what you decide you're feeling. I can't put probes on you and measure this. You have to tell me what you feel. So it's very subjective in that regard. And then engagement is what we've already talked about, being wonderfully, this way I describe, wonderfully absorbed in a task, only later realizing the passage of time, or you're even being aware of yourself. And the enjoyment of it tends to be something you recognize after it's done. So I think immediately of rock climbing, because rock climbing is one of those things you get up there, and because your whole brain is aware that gravity wants to pull you crashing down onto the ground, and the only thing keeping you from doing that is your little tiny fingers and toes trying to hold to the wall. It crystallizes everything in your brain, both survival and task orientation. And like no other activity I've ever done, this one, bam, time disappears. You're not thinking about yourself. There's no ego in this moment. All there is just, I have to not die, and I need to move up to the next hold. And then when you get done, you're like, and really you're feeling a lot of fear when especially when you're novice, or you're on a route that's harder than you've done before. You're feeling a great deal of stress. But when you get down on the ground, you're like, that was awesome. So if anybody wants to experience engagement, if they have any struggle with that, then I recommend going for a rock climbing experience. But of course, we can do that in music. Music can bring that out. So Werner, I imagine in some of your singing experience, and I have a little bit from when I was younger, being in a good choir, when you're in a group of people doing music and each have your parts, and it's like you can be totally absorbed. And it's a powerful thing to be a part of such a finely tuned multi-organism like that, multicellular organism. Would you say so, Werner?
Yes, I think so. It's even a little bit more. It can, to be totally absorbed in the task, can be very passive. When I'm in the Elbphilharmonie and watch a concert, I don't do anything and just enjoy.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm never realizing the time.
Yes.
It's always too short.
Yes. So someday when I come visit Hamburg, we're gonna go listen to some good music somewhere together at the Philharmonic. You showed me pictures of that. So the next thing here is relationships, so positive connection to others, which contribute to well-being. So we can think of being connected to others, but it's not very positive, or it's not contributing to well-being. So this is specific to positive connections and those that serve ours or their well-being. And then meaning, and that's touching on this higher order thing, is belonging to and serving something that you believe to be greater than the self. So again, it just depends. Each person might draw that circle around themselves in a bigger or smaller way, but it does involve other organisms besides the self. And it could be also the future generation. A person could be really, certain cultures are very oriented towards honoring the ancestors and preparing the next generations or the future. And of course, we would consider that very high ordered, very transcendent, to be concerned about people you'll never see. That's definitely something we would like to see more of us humans doing, being concerned about more, a bigger circle than ourselves. And then the last one is achievement. And achievement is interesting addition here. It's been added to this list of well-being really out of the weight of evidence in psychological research, because achievement, they recognize that achievement could be very, it could just be like, hey, let's put it this way. Humans are driven to pursue goals, to set goals and to pursue them. It's just something baked into our wiring. But those goals that people pursue, the need to pursue something, can be something meaningless or counterproductive to well-being. So it's acknowledged that there is a range of goals that, from intrinsically well-being oriented to extrinsic and destructive, and from the range of deeply meaningful to meaningless. But nonetheless, humans need to do things. And that's recognizing this basic human thing that we've got to be about something, we've got to be doing something. Babies got to roll, and they got to crawl, and they got to climb up and try to stand, and then they got to walk, and then they got to run. They just have to do it. We know that something is wrong with a baby when it doesn't do these things because it's wired to pursue. But then on the well-being side, we're thinking of goals that are aligned with our values, that are aligned with things that produce well-being for ourselves or for others, and things that, also can tie into anything in those other categories: emotions, engagement, relationships, and meaning. But we have to recognize that we're not just, sometimes I've had people say, oh, you're a human being, you should just be, you shouldn't be busy all the time. But I really understand it's both human doing and human being. If you emphasize one to the neglect of the other one too long, then something's not well. Both of them at different times in life, they have a role and they need to be there. Can't just be, we also have to do. And we can't just do, we also have to be. So again, looking at these 5 areas, then we could ask the question again, what are you more inclined to pay attention to and give your effort to? Maybe our answers wouldn't change from previously, but we can look there, which one tends to.
I think it's just in the time now, the relationships are very important.
Yeah.
And it's not a static thing, we can say.
No, it's not.
I would like your first 3 more as an equal-sided triangle.
Yeah.
Than the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And all these, I think, should be interwoven as Olympic rings, but the last ring is
Yes. Yeah.
interwoven to the others. And I do like it very much. It's so positive, and it should be. Till now, I've not seen it in this form. Great, but to go back to your question, I think in the moment for many of us, the relationships are most important.
Yes. And relationships both can mean, like, in the positive emotion direction, I'm engaging in relationships because it makes me feel good, but we could also engage in relationships because I feel a sense of meaning, like I need to give to them, I need to help them, I need to help my children or other people thrive, and there's a sense of meaning, because it goes in both directions, right? Doesn't it? It can be very personal and it can be very other oriented. And obviously, when it's positive relationships, it's covering both, hopefully at the same time. We're both getting something from it and we're giving out of it. And that reciprocation is what makes it so wonderful.
And I would add that it's very nice to have engaged in something and perhaps it connects to others and you're serving some cause that's higher than yourself, and that you're somehow recognized as having done a good job. And I realize that the achievement is actually for its own sake, the achievement as we've laid it out here. But I would say that more and more, the engagement, relationships, and meaning part of these, or these emphases, I think are, for me, more important than achieving certain things. I'm not really sure. I mean, if I think in terms of swimming, there is nothing like setting a goal and achieving it and saying, oh, whoa, I actually did make the big swim, or in Crete, I went down past the rocks and then came back and I was gone, for goodness knows how long. But that achievement at any cost is not what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in achievement if it hurts my body, if it's going to keep me from, for instance, swimming in the future, or if it wrecks my health in a different way. Let's say it's working on a project for work and everything else kind of goes to pot. And yeah, I've done this thing, but it came at too high a cost. That, Jamie, that's a little bit of what I guess you were talking about earlier. You were committed to serve, but it came at that time in your life at a pretty high cost to your well-being. So again, I think, this idea of balance and of these things working together. Werner, I love your idea of things being not in a hierarchy or even a stepladder here, but in a kind of synergistic sphere or circle, or I guess this would be a pentagon.
I'll modify this slide next time. I'll just kind of put them in a little circle.
Well, I was gonna, if Elizabeth's done sharing, I was gonna say I was visualizing also a circular thing, but mine, it's really helpful to have these all kind of laid out with words or titles to things I've been thinking of recently. But for me, it's more like a bullseye, and achievement is the ring on the outside, and positive emotions are the ring on the inside. And for me, the goal, my achievement, the thing that I'm aspiring to is to create a foundation on those positive emotions. And then as I feel good and secure, I start reaching out, tapping into engagement. And so I might be holding a handful of engagement, which means I have a little bit more capacity to reach beyond that to relationship. But then I feel it exhaust and I have to come back into positive emotion. Again, always kind of strengthening that basis or that foundation that gives me greater capacity to expand into those outer spheres. And what I'm hoping is, as I continue to strengthen and develop and get healthier in this one, I have a greater capacity for engagement, and then I have a greater support for relationships. And hopefully that culmination by part gives meaning, maybe for myself, to other people, but that, at least in my small, like narrow view right now, is my current goal set, that current achievement that I'm trying to work towards. And like I said, I'm kind of aiming in the dark, hoping that by supporting this and dabbling into engagement and relationships, I'll, figure out what I want to be when I grow up, which is probably what we all do. We target towards something, and then when we look back at retrospect, we're like, oh, I see the meaning, or hopefully, of how this has impacted others, impacted myself, what it has actually accomplished. We aimed for this, and we maybe got this instead, not realizing it by part of what we've been pursuing. So, like I said, I don't know how maybe this PERMA view actually breaks down, but as we've discussed it, for me, it's been more of this like pulsating target zone.
Everything is interrelated. We put them into categories like this, and scientists break things down. We sometimes criticize science for being reductionist and positivist and just stripping things down to these individual components. But really, we do that just because of our own brains, our ability to comprehend what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. But in reality, everything is intertwined in a very, very complex relationship. So even achievement, all of us have felt like, achievement. But even in the literature, it's saying that achievement is very rarely seen as something standing alone by itself. It's always intertwined with all these other things. We're never just linear. We're never just one thing, one motivation. Almost everything we're doing has at least some influence in multiple kinds of motivation in it. And so our achievements likewise, we may be pursuing a career, but there might be a little element of, hey, it pays really well, I like the money, but it's like, hey, but I'm also, I'm doing this great cause, I'm helping people. And then of course, and then if I get into a job, pretty soon I've got to be focused on turning the tasks into some sort of flow tasks, because I'll just go crazy if I don't have that kind of complexity in my day-to-day tasks. So we will start to mix and mingle various kinds of goals and achievement processes. So the next question to ask here then is, in just, in your own mind, is there an excuse me, is there an improvement opportunity in here somewhere? I'm doing good in this area, I'm really focused here, but I don't know, just looking around, if I were to kind of take a reading, if a doctor was to do a little probing and find out, hey, I'm a little deficient in this area, I could probably use a little help here or there. What one might we choose to? It might even just be a micro thing, like today, of all days, just today I kind of need maybe a little bit more of this, or this week, or whatever.
Well, I know personally, because of the isolation and the time that it affords, I've been fighting myself for engagement. There are several things that I want to accomplish, and I'm still stuck in doing my same, like what I've been doing prior to COVID, like day in and day out, saying that I'm going to engage in more study or more art or whatever, and haven't been. So for me, the next stage is pushing myself a little bit farther out of that middle sphere and in doing some discipline out in the engagement sphere during this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say that in my own sense of where I've been, let's say about the last, well, many, many years of my work, that my engagement and the meaning have sometimes put relationships that are not tied to that work at a distance. And I think for me, taking a real easy way out by saying, well, I really had no choice, that my work demanded this or that, when in fact, we always have choices in this sort of thing. And it was really an excuse, I think, to perhaps just withdraw and be more single-minded, and maybe to ignore issues of self-care, because relationships are incredibly important in my own self-care. I'm both outgoing, but I'm also pretty introverted, and I'm perfectly fine for great lengths of time to be solitary. But I like being connected to others, and I can get really, jazzed up with others. But I see right now, as both because of COVID-19, but also where I am in relation to my work, and then what I desire for the rest of my life, beginning this moment, is really try to look more at the relationship piece and take more time for those, to reach out more to people, and see if that doesn't make everything else that feels like a must do, if it kind of puts that more in its place.
Do you think that in this pursuit of investing more in relationships, is it something that you think how much of it is motivated by, I need to give more to others, versus if I spent time doing this, I would be getting something immediately? Or is it something like a delayed, because relationships are not quick, they're not fast food in terms of of getting rewards from them, right? They take an investment.
Well, I think that the more needy I feel
Mhm.
for others, the less likely I am to extend myself,
Mm,
because I really like feeling that I have something to offer other people.
Mm.
mhm.
And so if I'm morose or grieving, or, any of the, I'm thinking of Werner, negative emotions, they're human emotions, right? I tend not to reach out. And really that's when I need it most.
Mm,
And I think others really love being able to help, as I really love being able to support and help others. So it's
mhm.
kind of being able to tell myself, however I am, I can show up, I can reach out, I can ask for help, and know that it will be a back and forth.
Mhm.
That, yeah,
If you choose the right person, it'll be a back.
well,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right,
Because
yeah.
yeah, our therapist would say, "Oh, Matt or Elizabeth, you need to ask for help or reach out to somebody because number one, you need the help, you'll receive benefit. Number two, you're denying them the pleasure of being able to help, right? Because
Yeah,
that's
but we know you don't ask certain people for
yeah,
certain things. That's true.
and that's the thing. I everything you're saying, I'm like, oh, that's totally me because I yeah, there's risks to being vulnerable like that. You pick the wrong
Mhm.
person or the wrong time, and you find yourself ended up having to give to them anyways. It never ended up being about you, or when you needed it to be about you.
Well,
Or
and I don't want to burden others. I
yes, yeah,
really don't want to ask for too much.
yeah, I
And
totally resonate.
yeah, but and see, I'm at an age, and I've probably always been this way. It doesn't take a whole lot of people to to make me feel whole. It's
Mm,
just the right people.
yeah, yes,
Mm.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
then, you don't really have to spend a whole lot of time with them either. You just kind of click, or you open yourself. And at that moment when you're together, it's
Mm,
a really rewarding experience.
yeah, yeah.
Question for both of you, since you both feel, in this space of wanting to be vulnerable, not finding the space to be vulnerable. What do you need from others in order for that to be a space for you?
Well, first of all, Elizabeth and I solve it by just meeting up in Kosh in June. we just, we've just found each
Oh,
other. So we're like, hey, safe person, I can open
yeah,
up.
yeah. Jamie, I don't think it has to do with what other people are doing or not doing. In my case, I really think it has to do with it, getting greater awareness of, this is what my pattern is. Oh, I'm I'm uh, not positive, right? I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling low, or whatever. I'm close to tears. Let me just cut myself off because that's not acceptable. To recognize that, if I'm lucky enough to try to see the origins of it, I'm very aware of what those origins are. As for most of us, family stuff, way back when. I mean, I was just talking to my 91-year-old father, and he said, just now, how are you really? Because I know you, and I can tell when you're kind of down, and I don't want you down. I like it when you're positive, positive, positive. And I
Mm,
thought, well, there we go. They're the stage directions. And I mean, this has been
you
going
can't,
on for
yeah.
62 years. So then to say,
Mm,
I have a choice. I don't have to pull away. I don't have to turn away. And then,
mhm.
so it has to do not with what others are doing, but of really holding. To use the word discipline sounds odd because we think in terms of discipline punitive, but I don't mean it in this way. To have the discipline to stay with, and to not turn away, but to turn toward, and to pick up the phone, or join the webinar or, you know, send the email, whatever it is, text, and to ask. And sometimes just be. But it's not hard. It's not easy for me to do that always.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm just keep on talking. You're speaking a lot of what I is good.
You see, am I holding a mirror?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so much lower energy. It's such a much lower energy cost for me to go and just be by myself.
Yeah.
Because I can't turn off my monitor of what other people need or think and I've lost not I just have very low expectation that somebody else is truly going to be attuned to my inner state, because this is something that happens. Don't want to go too far down this rabbit trail, but in development, when we're babies, part of attachment theory is we need a caretaker, a primary caretaker, to pay attention, to be present, to be attuned to our internal state. And then when they accurately understand what's going on, then they demonstrate how to respond to that internal state. So we learn self-regulation by co-regulation, by having typically the mother figure show us appropriate. And then you can see all sorts of problems there, that if either the mom isn't present or not attuned or shows a dysfunctional response to the internal states, all these things can create, where nothing's ever perfect, but there are worse mixtures and better mixtures of those responses. And so then later in our life, whatever our pattern was from our early years, we have to work with that wiring inside of us. And there's some malleability to it. It's just really difficult to do it later in life. But now we're trying to regulate, and I've just had to develop a self-regulation style that I couldn't count on. I couldn't count on somebody else to be present, to attune, and to show me a response that really fits my internal state. I think I've gotten away pretty lucky, considering, but nonetheless, I tend to want a self-comfort because it's just reliable. And it's going to be a lot more successful than my experiences doing it with somebody else. But I still practice trying to do it in a marriage and with my own children and stuff. So I know it's not something that's finished and locked in concrete. But it takes a lot of effort to try to, because we're literally resisting the way our brains have been wired through that development process. It's possible, but it takes a lot of energy to do it. But with all that was great that we get into that to kind of recognize what's going on. But here we might struggle in one area, but if we gain some positive input in one of these other areas, it can lend some energy to allow us to go back and work on that area that maybe is a little bit more problematic for us. So on one hand, we don't want to neglect and just be extreme and only emphasize one area to the neglect of others. But at the same time, giving attention to other areas of well-being can give us some energy and give us some support to go and work on those areas, so that we can try to balance things a little bit better than they have been.
And sometimes, work can be a marvelous, it can be both a distraction and a way of keeping things going, so that there's a feeling that emerges of meaning and achievement and engagement. And so then it, as you say, can give me a little bit more energy to feel, oh, I'm not such a terrible person.
Yes. Yeah.
So needy. And so then I can, call a friend and be more acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is not how I want you all to think of me, that, I can.
Oh, you're a human?
Well, no. What I mean is, I don't want you to think that I only care about you when you are on top of the world, you know? I,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah,
when you're down and troubled and you
yeah.
need a helping hand, you know, I want to be your bridge over troubled water. But uh, it takes a lot to get over. But I do think that it doesn't happen once and forever. I think
No.
it's a daily thing for those of us who are,
Yeah,
as you
yeah.
said, Matt, really wired from very early to not ask for too much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to, well, I'm really glad that after this conversation, I have a session with my own therapist. I'm like, oh, remember this. Oh, remember that. Oh God, maybe I shouldn't do my session with my husband. I just need it for myself. I'm going to be selfish. No, all of this is really good. I find it's fascinating to see both of you on a similar posture based off of your upbringing, identifying similar things. It makes me wish there were more people in this conversation so I could kind of take a bigger sample pool of information, because it's I think Matt's really tapping into our grounding of positivity. I mean, anyone will go back to your primal developmental stages of life, your early development portion of your life, and that will shape how you approach your emotions, how you engage with the world, how you develop your relationships, and the capacity, that both your capacity to hold that and your need to fill that. So, and it varies from person to person, but we need that community. We need those relationships, both to encourage us to engage, to regulate our positive emotions, to build those relationships, to find meaning. We are communal people, and during this global crisis, we're finding how much humanity is dependent upon the community infrastructure, right? Not just for our economic status, but our mental and physical well-being. But how do we as people engage that community as a resource for our happiness spectrum, our well-being? Like you guys were saying, you don't feel comfortable asking for it, having to be kind of self-contained and self-reliant in that space. Whereas if we act like socialists and we had little barometers on our personal screen, you could say, oh, I have a little extra today, I could give you some. And you run into that person, oh, could you give me some of yours? Yes, certainly, I could give you some of me. Oh, okay. Or, I know I have extra, oh, I could find somebody to give it to. Or the radar, when you run into the black hole people and you're like, oh God, I don't have time for you. Run away. Be kind of helpful. But it just shows you how dependent we are on those interpersonal relationships, and how that supports these positive well-beings.
It's good stuff. Now, we've dipped in a little bit to our past. We reflect on our past to try to help us understand what we're doing in the future. One of the interesting things about positive psychology is that it's not attempting to be a therapist. It's not attempting to take us where we have to examine the past in order to make a positive impact in the future. The really interesting that's coming up from positive psychology interventions, things that is just simply pursuing things that are positive, can have a healing effect without necessarily having to go back and re-examine and hash out the whole past. There's definitely needs for doing that at times, and each one of us are going to find how beneficial it is to go back and have some understanding, like me just studying attachment theory and stuff like that. But I'm not saying it's every area of life, but in many things, we don't actually have to deal with the past to make a positive change for our future. So that's where looking at these topics and going, hey, if I can just know that I have different toggles here that I can go and I can work on this little area today. I can just do something that will boost this little area. Can do a lot. It can not only be a temporary boost of well-being, it can actually have a healing effect without us being conscious that the healing is taking place. And so that's really good news. Again, every individual is different, has a completely unique arrangement of good things and injuries in place. And so we have no idea what combination a person needs, any individual needs. But we just want to create encouragement here with these times together and me bringing up these topics, that there's just things that we can do that are actually low cost,
Mhm.
that have a really good return on, a benefit for very little cost. No tears necessarily required. I just read it in a book that said, regular psychology and therapy, psychotherapy is, you follow the trail of tears, but in
Mm.
positive psychology, you follow the trail of dreams. So the people that would work with you they focus on two different things. So
Mhm. Mhm.
so anyways, yeah, that nice discussion here on these things.
Yeah.
Let's shift. How do I get off my screen share there? Share. I was thinking, how do I get back to my?
If you highlight if you just put your cursor on your screen, is there something up at the top maybe that says stop screen sharing?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, I've still got to get my reactions down. There we are. We're back, all back together.
There you go.
Kind of shifting gears, just last minute or two here. Are there anything other topics that come up to mind? I mean, it could be back to swimming, could be exercise in general,
Yeah.
could be other things that have been.
Mm.
I took my boys fishing yesterday up at a lake. We had to drive about an hour up to a big reservoir. It's about half full right now because it's hoping to fill up with the winter runoff. The water was clear and beautiful, but it was like 40 degrees. That'd be about 5 or 6 Celsius. And, there's a fisherman out there, and he had taken the temperature. And I know very well that 40 degrees is below painful to get it. So it was
Wow.
cold and it was tempting, but not that tempting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but I've been really all winter ending a shower with, just being under the cold water. And of course, it's colder when the temperature outside is colder.
Yes.
But I was trying to do that to keep up so that then when I could return to the quarry in April, I thought that I could, because it had gotten cold enough in October that it was really quite wonderful. That total exhaustion afterwards, you're just filled with endorphins and you just want to go. It was wonderful. Somehow the shower is not really doing it to the same extent.
No.
But yeah, I think the benefits of cold water are just, a lot of people talk about them, but I think you're right. It's really important to be careful, and to know exactly all the factors of it, the after drop and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I'm still hoping that quarry swimming may be a possibility sometime before everything gets back to normal. But honestly, I think I mentioned we're talking about online teaching in the fall. I mean, we just don't know. Just don't know.
Well, it depends on who forces
what the governors say.
Yeah, but no, I agree with you. Cold water is so good at therapeutic, and maybe the showers don't help, like with your deep adaptation, the deep down in the body with deep aggressive heat conservation, but it can help at least maintain the surface response of the skin, and then it can help just psychologically with the discomfort of just normalizing it so that it's no longer uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think it really can maintain an edge. because it's like, I was afraid for this. I was thinking about writing on this. Just constantly exposing ourselves to things that just are slightly uncomfortable. We inoculate ourselves to discomfort. It allows us to maintain a much more even keel emotionally and just responsive wise. If we just have a small diet of discomforts, being slightly hungry at times, being slightly cold at times, being slightly sleepy, and but if we're always fighting so hard to climate control everything so there's no discomfort, the person actually becomes much more fragile physically and emotionally. So I did chicken out on cold showers this winter. I was like, no, I'm gonna do it. And I'm like, so yes.
No, it's different if you're really hot from the hot water and then you know, a minute in the cold. It's a different experience.
You know, I've tried the cold showers. I know someone who does cold immersion, so they'll sit there submerged in cold water, meditate and breathe and stuff like that. I'm like, that sounds amazing. It's too distracting to do in the shower. I feel like it'd be better if it was like a tub. You could just sit there and go.
Well, so you could do that.
Like, I want to run away from it.
So you got to go to a used appliance store or rec yard and find an old box freezer.
Yeah.
And then you put a plastic lighter in it, and then you can make your own, especially if it works. You can just turn on the freezer, and then you can control the temperature, and then you'd have your own little soaking tub.
Wow.
That's actually not a bad idea.
You could put it out on your deck, you know, or something like that.
Yeah, with my actual freezer.
Yes. So
I might exceed my weight limit out there if I tried to fill something with water.
It's on my list. I have to sit down and examine what's standing in my way of going back into cold water training. I know it would help if I had a place I could go swimming regularly, because then I would be, I'd have a task, I'd have a goal, but without kind of that there. But I really miss that flexibility. So. So it's good.
Well,
what? Yeah, Werner came back again.
I've been cut off. No, I have this three zoom clouds here. But next time I will picture this.
That's all right.
Next time I will picture a video with you.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you joined us. We got to see your video for a while there until it cut off. But yeah, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for this time with one another.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Yeah, my event that I had to help a friend with last week got postponed to this next week. So during the weekdays, I don't think I'll be available. So perhaps next weekend, I'm looking at another webinar sessions next Saturday, perhaps. So I'll send out notice on that, and we'll just keep seeing what each week brings to us and how we can respond to it. Life is going on in this alternative universe that we have found ourselves in.
Yeah.
So I really have no idea anymore what this next week is going to bring. Sky's the limit.
Right. But if we all have either toilet paper or a bidet, life is good.
Yes.
Yes.
No more worries.
Wow, that's good. Well, I love you all. Thanks for joining today. I hope we got some benefit out of this, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.
Okay.
Till then. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. I see you all, but you can see me.
That's right. We know your smiling face.
Yeah.
Bye.